The girl had just transmigrated, only to be forced into becoming a vampire's plaything. Though each of them was impossibly handsome, she knew all too well that as a human she was nothing more than meat on the chopping block. To stay alive she would have to win them all over. Her name was Huluobei, the bride of this wedding. A wedding was supposed to be joyful and festive, yet the guests below looked cold and detached, the atmosphere heavy, as if this were a funeral, not a wedding. Even stranger, on the way to the vampire castle, she lay inside a coffin filled with fresh flowers. Even after reaching the vampire's territory, her low status as a human meant she could only enter through the smallest gate. Though she was the bride of the day, she waited 8 long hours without her groom ever appearing. Finally fed up, she decided to run. Just as she thought she had escaped, a guard seized her and dragged her back. From the moment she was sent off to be married, she was destined never to return to the human world. She had become a sacrifice for peace between the two races. Only by staying here could war be avoided. Since there was no escaping this fate, she chose to face it head-on. Early the next morning, she learned from the guards that whoever won the Dracula tournament would take her as his wife. Everyone knew the winner would be Duke Ansel. As the Empire's marshal, his combat strength was unmatched. Even so, another duke still stepped forward. She was the only woman among the 4 dukes and had loved Ansel since childhood. Determined to stop him from marrying a human princess, she decided to give it her all. What she didn't know was that Ansel, who pursued victory his entire life, had never known defeat, and this time was no different. Catherine was quickly defeated. With no suspense at all, Ansel claimed the championship. Yet when faced with his future wife, he showed Huluobei no kindness at all. He even allowed his subordinates to deliberately make her late to the engagement banquet. But he still underestimated this human girl. Just as he was about to announce the start of the banquet, a sharp "wait" rang out and Huluobei actually arrived. Strangely enough, her feet were covered in scratches and her dress was stained with blood. To make it to the banquet on time, she had chosen to cut through the rose garden. Even as the thorns tore into her skin and blood soaked the hem of her dress, she insisted on arriving as scheduled. And so she finally danced with Ansel. Before long, a sharp pain suddenly shot through her. And when she looked down, she realized her wounds had split open. Ansel noticed it as well. Yet as her groom, he showed no concern at all. He even demanded they switch to a runway-style dance. She knew perfectly well that Ansel was deliberately toying with her. Still, she chose to endure it. Unexpectedly, blood began to drip from her wounds, releasing a rich, intoxicating scent. The vampires at the banquet quickly caught that fragrance, and Ansel was no exception. Under the influence of her blood, she suddenly looked breathtaking to him, and he couldn't resist the urge to lean in for a kiss. Fortunately, Duke Lin pulled her away at once, insisting that she needed immediate treatment. Ansel, however, refused to let her go. The next second, both men seized the girl's wrists, their gazes clashing in open confrontation. Luckily, Catherine stepped in and stopped them. Seeing this, Ansel had no choice but to let her leave. After returning to her room, she learned from the servants that His Majesty would personally summon her the next day. Yet when the day came, she discovered her foot had swollen to an alarming degree. Even so, she still chose to attend the banquet. The more they wished she wouldn't appear, the more determined she was to show up. Limping, she made her way into the hall. There she saw Catherine already seated beside Ansel, right where she was supposed to be. With no other option, she took another empty seat. But the moment she sat down, the other dukes all looked shocked. An enraged Ansel even turned his blade toward the girl. Before she could react, blood began to slide from her wounds. It turned out the seat she had just taken belonged to the vampire queen. Does a mere human, how could she possibly sit there? Just as the blades were about to fall upon her, His Majesty suddenly entered the hall. He saved the girl who had collapsed to the ground. With a single command from the Emperor, everyone immediately took their seats. His Majesty asked Ansel when he planned to marry the girl. Everyone expected Ansel to stall, yet he answered without hesitation, "Tonight." Though it was rushed and abrupt, the girl still agreed. When night fell, under the witness of the full moon, the wedding ceremony began. Ansel said the words of consent, even exchanged rings, yet deep down he held nothing but disdain for the girl. As punishment for her offense of defiling the queen's seat, he decided to leave her alone in the graveyard, something unheard of throughout history. Rumor had it that in this world human girls who married vampires never lived past 30. More disturbingly, none of them met a good end. To change such a fate, the girl resolved to make the vampires fall in love with her. Only then could she survive. Though she had just married Ansel, he utterly despised her and even left her alone in the graveyard. This clearly couldn't continue. After some thought, the girl decided to start by winning over his stomach. But having never cooked before, the cake she made was truly hard to look at. Ansel took just one glance, then immediately ordered the soldiers to seize her, accusing her of attempted assassination. What's more, he even convened a full tribunal determined to have her punished by the law. Just as the judge was about to deliver the verdict, Duke Lin stepped forward. He chose to put himself to the test, personally tasting the cake the girl had made. Though it tasted awful, there was indeed no poison in it. Lin argued that the girl deserved a chance to explain herself. It turned out she had baked the cake simply to please Ansel with no malicious intent. After learning this, Ansel decided to release her from prison. Yet he had no intention of letting her off so easily. The moment she was freed, he ordered his men to take her straight to the kitchen. If she failed to learn how to cook, she would be torn apart by 5 horses. With no other choice, she braced herself and began to learn. But the moment she saw the delicious desserts before her, her mouth instantly watered. Just as she reached out, she was immediately stopped. The one who intervened was the head chef. She ordered the girl to first prepare 1,000 portions of ingredients in exact proportions. Otherwise, no meals at all. For a girl who had never cooked before, it was an impossible task. To push her through it, the head chef even started giving her motivational pep talks. By evening, the girl finally finished the task, but her stomach began to growl loudly. Wandering into the corridor, she was soon drawn by an enticing aroma. Taking a closer look, she discovered a roasted chicken. Starving, she immediately grabbed a drumstick and started eating. To avoid being discovered, she even hid the plate inside her skirt after finishing. Just as she was about to leave, a math problem written on a blackboard caught her attention. Since she had eaten someone else's chicken, she decided to solve the problem for its owner. What she never expected was that this small act would mobilize the entire palace. They searched the whole castle but found no useful evidence at all. Only the girl was spared from inspection due to her special status. Ansel immediately led his soldiers to the girl's room, turning everything upside down yet finding no evidence at all. In fact, just moments earlier, the girl had acted to prevent exactly that. She went alone to the washroom and hid the plate by the window, narrowly escaping suspicion. What she didn't know was that by solving that math problem, she had already become a legend in Duke Hughes's eyes. To make a truly delicious cake, the girl even added her own blood to it. She did so for one simple reason: to please the vampires. The appearance was nothing special, but persuaded by the girl, the head chef finally took a bite. In the next instant, an overwhelming richness spread through her entire body. She immediately decided to put the girl in charge of the cake for tonight's banquet. Duke Lin was full of praise for the cake as well. He gestured for Ansel to have a taste. Expecting little, Ansel still couldn't resist the temptation. Lin called over the head chef to ask who had made the cake. Yet the name she gave was one Ansel had never heard before. Catherine, however, understood everything perfectly. She ordered the head chef to have the girl make even more cakes. But just how much blood would the girl have to give to finish them all? Determined to win Ansel's heart, she chose to go all in. At the banquet the next day, the cakes were still exquisitely delicious. Yet His Majesty merely took a single whiff, then immediately turned and left. Confused, Ansel asked where he was going. The answer came in just 2 words: save her. It turned out that in order to finish all those cakes, the girl had already lost too much blood and collapsed. Seeing this, His Majesty immediately lifted her into his arms. He then turned around and kicked the head chef hard. As for Ansel, who knew nothing of what had happened, he was harshly reprimanded as well. When the girl finally woke up, she found herself lying in Ansel's bedroom. At that moment, she realized her efforts had not been in vain. She had finally managed to share a room with Ansel. She even thought that if she could consummate the marriage and bear him a child, her position would be far more secure. But to her utter shock, Ansel not only refused, he even told her to sleep on the sofa that night. The moment she fell asleep, her snoring filled the room. It was so loud that Ansel couldn't get a wink of sleep. To get back at her, Ansel woke the girl early the next morning, claiming he was taking her out for morning training. Determined not to be looked down on, she stubbornly followed him and ran 20 laps. But her strength soon gave out and she collapsed. When she came to, she found herself cradled in Duke Lin's arms. Lin warned Ansel sharply, demanding to know if he had lost his mind. The two even broke into a fierce argument over the girl. At that moment, Catherine stepped forward to stop them. She couldn't understand why both men were acting so wildly over a human girl. She even began to fear that Hughes might end up the same way. Yet in Hughes's heart, only math problems were capable of driving him truly mad. What he never expected was that the girl was the very person who had solved them. Bored, the girl returned to that room once more. Just as she was working through the problem, a voice suddenly rang out. Startled, she fled in a panic. As she hurried away, she accidentally dropped one of her shoes. Though she was a princess of the human kingdom, after marrying into the vampire empire, she was shut out by her husband for being just 1 minute late. Left with no choice, the girl leapt up, intending to climb over the wall. Before she could even land, she was spotted by Ansel, who was bathing at the time. Losing control, the girl slipped and fell into the pool. Afterward, she explained that she had been late by a minute because she got lost. Ansel didn't believe her, having noticed that she was wearing only one shoe. Realizing there was more to this than met the eye, he pressed her again. But the girl still gave no answer. With no other option, he told her to wash up first. As she bathed, the girl continued thinking about the math problem from earlier. The problem had been solved, but her shoe was now being carefully kept. For the girl was the very person Duke Hughes had been searching for all along. Ansel soon sensed this as well. When Hughes questioned him, Ansel claimed to know nothing. Yet Hughes could never have imagined that the one he had longed to find was right before him. Judging by what the girl was wearing, she was about to follow Ansel to the military camp. Upon hearing this, Catherine immediately grabbed Ansel by the collar, declaring that he had gone mad. Ansel paid her no attention and continued leading the girl into the military camp. As the girl looked at the swords, she instinctively reached out to touch one, only to be told that they were blades left behind by human ancestors. Trophies taken after victory. Hearing this, the girl clenched her fists. Though she too was human, her parents had sold her for money, and her people had sacrificed her for their safety. From that moment on, she no longer felt any attachment to them. Though her veins did not carry vampire blood, her heart had already stayed here. Hearing these words, Ansel felt deeply satisfied. Elsewhere, Catherine reported the girl's entry into the military camp to His Majesty. Yet not only did His Majesty find it acceptable, he even told her not to meddle. This only made Catherine angrier. Fueled by rage, she decided to confront Ansel. On the way, she ignored the girl's greeting outright. Faced with her sharp accusations, Ansel replied calmly with a single question. Was she jealous? Catherine was left speechless. Had she married him back then, Ansel would never have taken a human bride, and now whatever the girl said no longer mattered. Yet the girl heard every single word. Catherine soon noticed her as well. She warned the girl that from the moment they were born, the four of them had always done everything together. Even if the girl had become Ansel's wife, she would still remain an outsider to them. Only then did the girl truly realize it. Whether it was food or daily habits, she was still human, still an outsider. Even later that night as she bathed, the gloom lingered. She couldn't help wondering if her arrival had become the one stain on Ansel's life. Perhaps he would never truly come to like her. Her sadness was so obvious that Ansel quickly noticed it. He asked the girl to sit beside him, admitting that he had indeed been too harsh on her before, and promising he would no longer treat her coldly on purpose. Hearing this, the girl finally showed a long-lost smile. Though she was a princess of the human kingdom, after marrying the king of the blood clan, she was constantly met with jealousy, and even her most trusted guard had betrayed her. Not long ago, a guard had told the girl that if she wanted to survive here, she had to make integrating into vampire society her goal. Ansel was the next king of the blood clan, and as the future queen, the first thing she needed to do was build her own influence. But as a human, how was she supposed to manage that? The truth was that while the four dukes appeared united on the surface, each of them had their own interests to protect. The reason Catherine had refused to marry Ansel back then was because before the war began, Ansel's family held little real power within the empire. Only after the outbreak of war between humans and vampires did Ansel's family truly rise. By then, however, Catherine was already filled with regret. Since Ansel had accepted the girl's presence, What she needed to do now was start building connections. That evening, the girl told Ansel she wanted to host a tea gathering in her own name. Ansel agreed almost immediately. To show her gratitude, the girl leaned in and kissed Ansel lightly on the cheek. Caught completely off guard, Ansel flushed bright red. The next day, the girl invited the wives of several high-ranking imperial officials and prepared an elegant spread of tea and desserts. Yet she waited and waited all the way until evening without a single guest appearing. Standing before Ansel, her disappointment left her at a loss for words. To her surprise, Ansel was the one who began comforting her instead. If those ladies refused to show her respect, then he would be the one to taste her cooking himself. To cheer the girl up, Ansel even ate broccoli, the vegetable vampires despised the most. Even though he felt like throwing up afterward, he forced himself to swallow it. Everything between the two was clearly seen by Catherine nearby. Watching their bond grow so close, Catherine decided she would tolerate the girl no longer. Taking advantage of Ansel's inspection of the troops, she sent her men to seize the girl. The charge she placed on her was treason, colluding with the enemy. Yet the girl knew full well she could never have done such a thing. From the moment she married into the Blood Clan, the human empire had already abandoned her. Faced with Catherine's fabricated evidence, the girl showed not the slightest fear. "Can a person really be convicted based on just a few words?" she shouted in rebuttal before the court. What she never expected was that Catherine had not only forged physical evidence, but had also colluded with the guards against her. The girl could hardly believe that the person she trusted most had joined forces with Catherine to frame her. She had done nothing wrong, yet at this point no explanation would change anything. As shouts calling for punishment echoed from the crowd below, Duke Hughes remained silent. Left with no other choice, he declared the girl guilty of treason. She should have been executed on the spot, but due to her special status, she was instead thrown into the dungeon. Seeing her scheme succeed, Catherine made sure to crush the girl's last remaining hope. She told her that Ansel despised treason above all else, and that once he returned, the girl's despair would only deepen. Yet the girl understood that now the only one who could save her was her husband, Ansel. She believed he would come for her, but never imagined that he would instead divorce her outright. When Ansel first heard the news, he refused to believe it. In his eyes, the girl had already become an inseparable part of his life. That was until Catherine produced the so-called evidence. The moment he saw the envelope, he was left with nothing but resignation. Faced with written proof in black and white, he could no longer save the girl. Meanwhile, in the prison, the girl continued to wait anxiously for his arrival. Gloating, Catherine told her that Ansel would not protect her this time. As long as she remained Ansel's wife, she would inevitably be sentenced to death by hanging. Only by divorcing Ansel and becoming a commoner could she be declared innocent and released. Hearing this, the girl completely broke down, shouting that they had no right to strip her of everything. But Catherine's reply left her in total despair. She had never possessed any rights to begin with. Only then did the girl finally realize that from the moment she was sent here, she had been nothing more than a sacrifice. A mere sacrifice, yet she had once believed there was someone she could rely on. Now she realized it had all been an illusion. Looking at the furious Blood Clan crowd below, the girl could not understand what she had done wrong to deserve such undeserved cruelty. Some even began throwing eggs at her. As insults rang out from the crowd, tears streamed down the girl's face. All of this was watched closely by Catherine. She knew that as long as Lin did not betray her, His Majesty would never learn of her scheme against the girl. When night fell, the girl finished her makeup, and once again stepped into the hall where the wedding had once been held. The people before her still looked familiar. Yet she understood that the two of them were no longer who they had been that day. Under the priest's declaration, the girl and Ansel were officially divorced. She slowly removed her ring. Ansel watched the girl's lonely figure without saying a word, regret lingering in his eyes. The girl turned and walked away. Though no longer a queen high above all others, she would at least be able to live freely from now on. Ansel stared at her retreating back, unable to let go. Even at the banquet, the other nobles congratulated Ansel, celebrating that he had finally rid himself of a human wife. Catherine was no exception. Even so, the girl's image continued to linger in Ansel's heart. He went to her residence and secretly watched over her. What he didn't realize was that this very act would bring her harm once again. Catherine had quietly followed him there as well. Witnessing the scene, she swore to herself that she would never let the girl off so easily. To enter the academy, one had to sign a life or death waiver, for bullying incidents occurred there every single day. Without choosing a faction for protection, one could be abused to death. Framed by others, the girl was about to be sent to this school. Yet before that, she was still being hunted down. To save the girl, the coachman leapt forward without hesitation, plunging into a bottomless abyss. By sheer luck, they were stopped by a massive tree and survived. To reach the academy in time, the coachman carried the girl and leapt through the air again and again. Elsewhere, 2 examiners were still waiting for the final applicant. With less than 1 minute left before the deadline, just as they were about to leave, the coachman arrived with the girl right on time. However, one of the examiners claimed that the girl had arrived late. Yet she had clearly made it right on time, not a second late. As the 2 examiners were still discussing the matter, they suddenly noticed the coachman behind them, his eyes filled with a chilling glare as he stared them down. Seeing this, both examiners immediately bowed at a 90-degree angle, warmly welcoming the girl. The girl had no idea what was going on, but there was no time to question it. Relieved, she grabbed the coachman's hand and hurried into the academy. Soon the 2 of them were led into a room. An examiner handed the girl a life or death waiver. Hearing those words, the girl's face filled with shock. After confirming it with the coachman, she signed the document without hesitation. When they reached the dormitory, the coachman handed the girl a small bottle. He explained that it was a potion meant to conceal her human scent and that she had to drink it once every 7 days, or she would be exposed. The girl didn't hesitate for even a moment and drank it down immediately. She understood clearly that at this point, aside from the coachman, she had no one else she could trust. After explaining everything, the coachman prepared to leave. He had helped the girl so much, yet she didn't even know his name. When she asked, the coachman told her his name was a lie. And just like that, the girl successfully moved into the dormitory. But the moment she lay down on the bed, a strange smell filled the air. She lifted the blanket and found a pool of blood beneath it. Had the previous occupant died from blood loss? As she was thinking about it, a burst of noisy commotion suddenly erupted. The girl went to the window, only to see a group of students engaged in blatant bullying. Without hesitation, she rushed downstairs. But the moment she shouted for them to stop, a boy grabbed her and pulled her back. He warned her not to try shielding others before she had the strength to protect herself. Even so, the girl felt she couldn't just stand by and do nothing. When she reached the tree nearby, she discovered that the bullied boy had already passed out. Trembling, the girl reached out and gently stroked the boy's head. Tears streamed down her face, impossible to hold back. Fueled by anger, she called out to the group, determined to demand justice for him. But they sneered back. What right did she have to stand up for anyone? Just a 3rd-generation blood, who did she think she was to make a scene? In this academy, without choosing one of the 4 great families as protection, there was only one ending: death. Trapped in such a brutal environment, how was the girl supposed to survive? To seek justice, she even chose to face the bullies alone. Yet even then, she couldn't solve the problem. Instead, she placed herself in even greater danger. To protect her, the boy slipped a small note through the door, telling her not to attend class for the time being. The girl understood his concern, but she also knew she couldn't hide forever. If she wanted to stand her ground in the academy, she had to face it head-on. Soon, she walked into the classroom and attended her very first lesson. From the instructor, she learned that sacred blood vampires were not necessarily born that way. Through effort after birth, one could still become sacred blood, though the chance was less than 1%. The instructor believed that anyone sitting there had already put life and death aside. Soon, he handed out the test papers and announced the entrance exam. For a human, if the test were about vampire knowledge, the girl should have been completely lost. Yet when she examined the paper closely, she realized the questions were no harder than 3rd grade elementary level. Almost laughably easy. She finished the test early. To avoid drawing attention, she decided to rest her head on the desk and take a short nap. When she woke up, the exam was already over. She handed her paper to the instructor. Watching her walk away, the instructor wondered who she truly was. Someone even His Majesty chose to protect. But the moment he saw her answers, everything became clear. Soon, the freshmen's results were posted publicly. The girl didn't even bother to look, knowing full well she would be ranked first. The boy asked which family she planned to choose. Her answer was the same as before: none of them. She believed she could take first place in every subject. What she hadn't expected was that the academy tested not only scholars but warriors as well. As a human, her body quickly gave out. Thankfully, the boy was there to support her. Before leaving, he warned her once more. Without choosing a side, her fate would be death. But having once been a duchess, the girl understood clearly. No matter how powerful the four great families were, in the end she could rely only on herself. Her body aching all over, she lay on the bed thinking about what she should do next. Just then there was a sudden knock on the door. When she opened it, she found it was Alai. Hearing that the girl had nothing scheduled today, Alai had brought her some medicine. Watching how thoughtful and gentle he was, the girl couldn't help imagining how happy she might be if Alai were the one she married. Wanting Alai to stay close, she asked whether she would be able to see him often in the future. Alai replied that he would stay by her side. Only then did the girl show a satisfied smile. Meanwhile, news of the girl's perfect score in mathematics quickly reached Duke Hughes. When he learned that the exam paper itself had been written by her, his expression turned to pure astonishment. Eager to meet such a prodigy, Hughes decided to go to the academy in person, determined to recruit her. Though she was not a vampire, she held the key to the Blood Clan's lifeline. For with exceptional mathematical ability, one could become a supreme high priest. Yet at present she faced a serious problem. Her warrior score was far too low. In this academy, only students ranked in the top 10 overall were granted the right to freely choose a family. Just like Lia, who ranked first, she was free to choose Ansel's family. The girl insisted on staying independent, but her overall ranking was beyond 200. As a result, she had no such right and could only accept the academy's assignment. Given her strong academic performance, the instructor placed her in the education department. It sounded promising on the surface, but the moment she met the students there, she was met with open insults. To deliberately target her, someone even pushed her down the stairs. And it didn't stop there. Seeing her on the ground, they began kicking and trampling her, giving her no chance to speak. It was only when Duke Hughes appeared that they finally stopped. To cover themselves, they lied and claimed the girl had fallen on her own, insisting it had nothing to do with them. The girl thought Hughes would help her, but instead he ignored her and even told her not to block his way. Lying on the ground, the girl felt an indescribable sense of loss. Fortunately, Alai arrived and reached out, trying to take her away. But the girl was barely able to stand at that point. Seeing this, Alai gently lifted her into his arms and carried her back to her room. Meanwhile, in his search for a mathematical prodigy, Hughes summoned Lia and prepared a separate test just for her. Despite giving it everything she had, Lia still scored only 59 points. With a single glance, Hughes understood that she was not the person he was looking for. He began to think carefully. Could the one he sought be that girl instead? But the image of the girl lying on the ground moments earlier, utterly miserable, made him dismiss the thought at once. What he never imagined was that the person he had searched for so desperately was, in fact, that very girl. To improve her warrior score, the girl had even skipped her mathematics class. After all, math was too easy. She would rather spend the time strengthening her body. If she missed once, she would shoot 1,000 times, 10,000 times until she finally hit the mark. Just as she was practicing, a stone suddenly flew toward her. It struck her arm. By sheer coincidence, the impact caused her arrow to hit the bullseye. The one who had thrown the stone was none other than Duke Hughes, though she initially thought he was bullying her. It was only after Alai explained that the girl realized Hughes had been guiding her all along. Even so, she couldn't understand why he chose such a method instead of teaching her properly. The girl complained nonstop to Alai. To cheer her up, Alai promised that he would personally teach her archery from then on. During their free time, Alai told the girl that as long as her mathematics was strong enough, she could calculate the laws governing balance and center of gravity, which was the prerequisite for becoming a Blood Clan priest. By passing the examination, one could gain the chance to control the very lifeline of the Blood Clan. However, ever since the queen passed away, the Blood Clan had been without a high priest. Hearing this, the girl patted Alai on the shoulder and said that she would be the future high priest. She had once been the dream woman of every man in the empire, only to be ruthlessly abandoned after marriage. Now, through her own efforts, she had become a candidate priest of the Blood Clan. When they met again, she no longer regarded him as worth her attention. Not long ago, in order to become a priest, the girl skipped all her classes, focusing solely on improving her mathematics. She had thought Alai stayed by her side of his own free will. But after asking him, she learned that everything had been arranged by His Majesty. Upon hearing this, her expression changed instantly. She told a lie that he could leave, that she did not need him anymore. The girl decided to remain here and study, vowing to become the greatest astrologer, revered like the first queen. Understanding this, a lie could only leave in resignation. Soon the graduation examination arrived. News of the girl achieving a perfect score in mathematics quickly spread throughout the academy. Even so, the instructor still refused to acknowledge her. Just as she began to protest, a lie suddenly walked in. The instructor immediately became respectful, and his attitude toward the girl changed at once. Since you cannot make the decision yourselves, then listen to the opinions of the dukes. The matter soon reached the ears of Duke Lin. He immediately sought an audience with His Majesty, only to find the palace empty. Choosing to act first and report later, the girl thus set foot on the road to the Holy Temple. This time she would not only become a sage, but also the foremost battle astrologer, commanding the obedience of all. Before long, the girl arrived at the Holy Temple. Ansel noticed her at once. Seeing her again, he felt she seemed somewhat unfamiliar. He reached out, intending to touch her. Thinking Ansel was about to strike her, Lin immediately stepped in to stop him. After all, the girl was now the temple's new candidate priestess, and Ansel no longer held such authority. But Ansel had no intention of hurting her. He only wanted to see what the candidate for the high priestess looked like. Since it was her, it seemed unlikely she would truly become a priestess. Offended by his arrogance, the girl stepped forward and declared that she would definitely become the high priestess. Angered, she turned and left. She did not even take her luggage with her. Seeing this, Ansel immediately told her to go back and collect her belongings. The girl ignored him completely and walked straight out of the palace. Lin followed after her, trying to speak on Ansel's behalf. In Ansel's eyes, however, Lin looked as though he was flirting with his former wife. He strode forward and shoved Lin aside. Lin quietly warned the girl that acting like this would only make him feel humiliated. Yet the girl thought only one thing: he was already her ex-husband, so what right did he have to interfere? The girl grabbed Lin by the arm. She stated clearly that she could like whoever she wanted, and Ansel had no right to interfere. Hearing this, Ansel grew even angrier and warned Lin to stay away from her. Instead, Lin pulled the girl into his arms. Right in front of Ansel, he confessed his feelings to her. "But tell me, from childhood until now, when have you ever beaten me?" Ansel said confidently. The two immediately confronted each other. Yet neither of them paid any attention to how the girl felt. With a dark expression, the girl declared that she would choose neither of them. After saying that, she turned and walked away at once. In the past, she had been treated as a toy, passed around by the dukes, but this time she would be herself. Even if she was not a vampire, she would rely on mathematics to unravel the secret of the Blood Clan's immortality. Because once that secret was solved, she would become the supreme priestess of the Blood Clan. Meanwhile, Ansel was urgently searching for the girl. When he questioned Lin, even Lin could only say that he did not know where she was. The two of them then made their way to the Blood Clan's forbidden grounds. To their shock, they discovered the girl was solving a mathematics problem. Through her efforts, the answer to the secret gate was finally about to be revealed. The girl stepped up to the gate and slowly extended her hand. She traced a pattern on the surface of the door with her finger. The very next second, the gate burst into a dazzling light. But when it finally opened and they looked inside, they found nothing but a pool of spring water. Clearly, the matter was far more complicated than expected and required an immediate audience with His Majesty. Before long, the news reached Hughes. After confirming that the gate had been opened by the girl, Hughes suddenly realized that the mathematical puzzle in his own room must have been solved by her as well. Left with no choice, the girl told the truth. She had assumed Hughes would punish her for it. But to her complete astonishment, Hughes pulled her into his arms and declared that from now on she would be his wife. The other two immediately grew agitated. The girl looked at the man who had just confessed so passionately. She replied that proposing simply because she had solved a math problem made the feeling seem far too frivolous. Seeing Hughes rejected, the other two could not help but laugh at him. But in the girl's eyes, the three of them were all cut from the same cloth. The moment those words were spoken, all three men grew displeased. No matter what happened today, the girl was forced to choose one of them. Left with no choice, she finally spoke her true feelings. The person she loved was named a lie. Yet the name was unfamiliar to all three, prompting them to decide to investigate it thoroughly. At that moment, His Majesty suddenly approached. Raising his hand, he publicly declared that the girl would henceforth serve as the Grand Priestess of the Blood Clan. Just as the investiture ceremony was about to begin, a sharp cry of "I object" echoed through the palace. The one who stepped forward was none other than Catherine. She argued that as a human, the girl could never become the Grand Priestess unless she turned into a vampire. Yet once transformed, the girl would only be a half-blood, immortal perhaps, but forever deprived of a normal life. Just as the girl hesitated, His Majesty declared the objection invalid, stating that as long as the Grand Priestess's identity remained secret, there would be no issue. Hearing this, Catherine had no choice but to agree. And so the girl successfully became the Grand Priestess. Though her identity could not be made public, the celebration could not be omitted. At the banquet the following day, the girl appeared in a long black gown, instantly drawing the attention of the dukes. Seeing this, Hughes immediately stepped forward to confess his feelings. However, every bit of it was witnessed by Catherine standing nearby. She smiled as she quietly plotted something of her own. At that moment, a young girl suddenly crashed into the girl. The girl instinctively looked down. The young girl clutched her chest with both hands and collapsed in front of her. In the girl's hand, a dagger had appeared out of nowhere. Staring at the fallen girl in shock, she was overwhelmed with panic. She had done nothing, yet was being framed as a murderer. The facts were right there for all to see. Everyone had witnessed the scene. After learning that the deceased was Hughes's fiancée, the girl immediately stated that she had no reason to kill her. However, the victim's parents could no longer restrain themselves. Driven by their emotional outburst, Catherine demanded on the spot that the girl be thrown into the dungeon at once. Soon after, both Ansel and Lynn stepped forward. Hughes did as well. He explained that as long as the girl agreed, he would marry her immediately, making it pointless for her to murder the young woman. Hearing this, both Lynn and Ansel nodded in agreement. Witnessing this, Catherine completely lost control, angrily questioning whether they would truly turn against her for the sake of a human girl. Ansel replied bluntly that she had gone too far. If Catherine insisted on convicting the girl, then Hughes, as the chief judge, would report the matter directly to His Majesty. With the situation having reached this point, the victim's parents had no choice but to concede. Even so, Catherine refused to let it go, granting only 5 days. If the truth was not uncovered by then, the girl would pay with her life. Determined to prove her innocence, the girl accepted without hesitation. Yet during those 5 days, Catherine had no intention of letting her off easily. To poison the girl, she even bribed a servant close to Lynn. Just as the girl was about to drink, Hughes immediately stopped her. When the teacup shattered, they discovered the water contained a lethal poison. Hughes warned the girl that unless the food was delivered by him personally, she was not to eat anything. But hiding forever was not a solution, so in order to uncover the truth, the girl chose to take the initiative. Accompanied by Hughes and Ansel, she went to the body of the young woman, preparing to conduct an examination. During the process, she discovered that the young woman had not been killed by the dagger, but by a silver needle concealed in her hand. After learning the truth, the girl visited the victim's home and explained everything in detail to the bereaved parents. Yet instead of caring about the truth, they accused the girl of desecrating the dead. Fortunately, with 2 dukes present to testify, the situation did not spiral out of control. Only after learning that the girl was the new priestess of the Blood Clan did they agree to withdraw the charges. Hughes and the girl then stood together by the window. The girl asked Hughes why he had not allowed her to reveal the truth earlier. Since the young woman had clearly not been killed by the dagger, why was the case concluded so hastily? Hughes explained that his actions were not only to clear the girl's name, but also to keep the 4 great families in check. Only through balance could the empire remain stable. The true culprit's goal was far more than framing the girl. It was likely an attempt to overthrow the entire Blood Clan. Without solid evidence, no one could afford to act rashly. Only then did the girl truly realize that she was no longer just a human princess, but now also the Grand Priestess of the Blood Clan. What she bore was no longer merely a title but a heavy responsibility. How ruthless this girl was, just to find the one she loved. She was willing to gamble with her own life, even choosing to leap into a bottomless abyss, an act born of sheer desperation. Not long before, in search of evidence, the girl had gone alone to the memorial hall. The sound of rummaging quickly alerted the patrolling guards. To evade capture, the girl hid beneath a coffin. When she opened her eyes, she discovered a small note affixed underneath. This, it turned out, was the true evidence behind the young woman's murder. Realizing the gravity of the matter, the girl decided to seek an immediate audience with His Majesty. What she never expected was that her movements had already been noticed by Catherine. To prevent the evidence from reaching the emperor, Catherine decided to silence her permanently. Thus, on the girl's way back to the palace, assassins were dispatched to kill her. The girl knew all too well who wanted her dead. Fortunately, thanks to Alai's earlier help, she still had the strength to fight back. Before long, however, she realized she had fallen into a carefully laid trap. Meanwhile, news of the girl's disappearance quickly reached the dukes. To find her as soon as possible, Ansel ordered the entire city placed under lockdown, determined to locate the princess. Seeing how anxious the dukes were, Catherine sneered and mocked them, saying that mobilizing the entire Blood Clan army for a single woman boded ill for the future. Not long after, the soldiers discovered traces related to the girl. What Ansel never expected was that the body brought before him appeared to be the girl's. Unable to believe it, Ansel trembled as he lifted the white cloth. Only then did he realize the deceased was not the girl, and he finally breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that the girl had smeared blood onto her bracelet to signal that she was safe. Judging from the situation, she must have been rescued, but where could she be now? Although the girl had survived, the assassins continued their relentless pursuit. At the instant the blade was about to fall, she realized she had been saved once again. By scent alone, she immediately knew it was Alai who had rescued her. Yet no matter how she called out, Alai refused to reveal himself. To force him to appear, the girl decided to gamble with her life once more. She leapt forward, choosing to plunge into the endless abyss. At the critical moment, a white-haired youth with black wings rescued her. Though his appearance had changed, the girl could clearly sense that he was Alai. She had loved this man for 10 long years, never imagining that he was already married. In that instant, every beautiful illusion she once held shattered completely. This was a man who had saved her time and again, even tending to her wounds with patience. Yet how could someone who treated her with such care already belong to another? The girl still refused to accept the truth. She grabbed Alai's hand tightly. She questioned why he wore no wedding ring. Among the Blood Clan, marriage was sacred, that if he were truly married, how could he not wear one? Alai slowly raised his hand to his neck. From there he took out the ring. Staring at it, the girl found herself at a loss for words. After learning the truth, she apologized softly, choosing to treat everything that had just happened as nothing more than an illusion. On the way back, neither of them spoke a single word. When they reached the palace, the girl handed the evidence to Alai. In this palace, Alai was the only person she could truly trust. She believed he would personally deliver the evidence to the emperor. Once this matter was over, she and Alai would never meet again. The girl staggered forward along the road. Losing her balance, she collapsed to the ground. Even then, she murmured Alai's name under her breath. Goodbye. When she awoke, she found herself lying in a room. Ansel and Hughes were still discussing how to perform surgery on the girl's leg. Hearing this, the girl tugged lightly at Ansel's sleeve, saying she could undergo the surgery without anesthesia. But the pain of broken bones was something even Blood Clans struggled to endure, let alone a human like her. Despite everyone's repeated persuasion, the girl still chose to proceed without anesthesia. Compared to heartache, physical pain no longer felt like suffering, but rather a form of release. Throughout the operation, the girl never cried out in pain. Even Ansel, a marshal, felt ashamed by comparison. Facing such a strong-willed girl, Ansel was filled with regret. But regret was meaningless now. The real question was how to win her back. To prove her innocence, he decided to attend the funeral alone, keeping it from the girl. What Ansel never expected was that every word he spoke was clearly heard by her standing behind the door. Even though she had just undergone surgery, the girl insisted on going herself so the truth could be revealed. Seeing this, Ansel immediately ordered her to stay in bed and go nowhere. The girl simply shook her head, insisting she was going no matter what. Since she was so determined, the three of them had no choice but to think of a solution. Going wasn't impossible, it was just that the method might be a little unusual. The girl was still confused. In the next moment, she instantly regretted it. Because the Dukes placed her inside a coffin, anyone unaware would think it was her funeral. The Dukes arrived at the scene. They announced that the funeral would officially begin. Seizing the moment, the girl sat up from the coffin and declared that the young woman would finally rest in peace today. Yet the victim's parents still believed their daughter's death was the girl's fault. Although she could understand the pain of losing a child, the girl insisted she was not the murderer. She then presented the copied evidence. After learning the truth, the two of them finally calmed their anger. Seeing that the evidence had been exposed, Catherine panicked. She rushed straight to the palace. There she threatened the soldier transporting the evidence, intending to silence him. At that critical moment, a sharp blade suddenly appeared behind Catherine, aimed straight at her. From her attempt to threaten the soldier, it was clear that she was the one who killed the young woman and framed the girl. If the girl were merely human, it might have been one thing. But she was now the Blood Clan's high priestess. What right did Catherine have to act this way? Faced with everyone's questioning, Catherine showed no panic at all. Instead, she arrogantly declared that without solid proof, there was nothing they could do to her. Just as the standoff reached its peak, an imperial decree suddenly arrived, ordering the 4 great dukes to appear at court immediately. Catherine never expected that the letter she had written to the young woman had already reached the emperor's hands. Realizing the situation had turned against her, Catherine confessed that she had indeed tried to frame the girl. However, she insisted that the young woman's death was not her doing. The girl had been her teammate, and she had no reason to kill her. After careful consideration, Hughes and Ansel realized that something about the case was indeed suspicious. As a result, the emperor decided that until the truth was fully uncovered, Catherine would be confined to the hospital. Soon after, Hughes conveyed the decision to the girl. The girl began to reflect on everything that had happened. At that moment, one person suddenly came to her mind. And almost instantly, she was certain it had to be him after all. She had not been in the Blood Clan for long. The only real suspect was the guard who had once betrayed her, Alan. To capture him, the girl asked Ansel to deploy soldiers and set an ambush near shops that sold human food. As long as Alan was still within Blood Clan territory, catching him would be effortless. Just as the girl had expected, Ansel soon succeeded in capturing Alan. Under her interrogation, Alan finally confessed to everything. It turned out that the silver needle that killed the girl was the very one Alan had been forced to swallow. The girl lifted Alan's chin and asked why he had framed her again and again. In the end, everything he had done came down to a single desire: immortality. As long as he completed the task Catherine gave him and eliminated the girl, he could become a half-blood vampire and achieve eternal life. Hearing this, the girl realized he was beyond redemption and immediately ordered him thrown into prison. At that moment, a man dressed in black suddenly appeared before Alan. He removed his hood, revealing long blonde hair. There was no doubt about it, it was Lin. The true mastermind behind the entire scheme had been him all along. Lin praised Alan for playing his role perfectly in front of the girl and promised to fulfill the wish he had been given. But he also delivered bad news: the emperor had already ordered Alan's execution. Alan knew he was destined to become a disposable pawn, and in order to survive, he decided to reveal his true identity. To keep using him, Lin chose to spare Alan's life for the time being. Soon, news spread that Alan had been dumped into a mass grave. Even though Alan had betrayed her, he had once been the only person she truly trusted. After hearing of his death, the girl could not suppress the pain in her heart. What she never imagined was that Alan hadn't died at all. Instead, he arrived at the entrance of a mountain cave. Staggering, he made his way inside. Sitting within was a prince, and if not for his intervention, Alan would have long been dead. To repay this life-saving debt, Alan deliberately gathered information. On the surface, the 4 dukes appeared united, but behind the scenes they were constantly at odds. Meanwhile, the vampire race had gained a new chief priestess. Though she was the dream of countless men across the empire, she would never be allowed to marry. Once someone became a vampire priest, their entire life had to be devoted to reading the heavens and guiding the fate of the vampire race. Just a week earlier, relentless storms had swept through vampire territory, and devastating floods had left countless clansmen homeless. To deal with the disaster, Lin stated that the position of chief priest had been vacant for far too long. With the situation growing dire, the people urgently hoped a new priest would be chosen to dispel the calamity. Standing by the window and watching the torrential rain, the girl finally understood how vital the chief priest truly was to the vampire race. At that moment, the emperor suddenly summoned her. The girl knew very well that this audience could only be about the chief priesthood. The emperor told her that if she were to become the vampire race's chief priest, she would have to devote her entire life to divining the heavens and the fate of the vampires, never marrying for the rest of her days. Even so, was she still willing to become the chief priest? The girl's gaze was firm and her expression resolute as she accepted without hesitation. Yet the moment she stepped out of the palace and saw Alai, a trace of doubt and regret surfaced in her heart. She moved forward and wrapped her arms tightly around him, murmuring softly, from today on she would be the true chief priestess and their relationship could go no further. Hearing her confession, Alai held her as well, a hint of regret in his voice. Yes, from now on she was the chief priestess, destined to save countless disaster victims. Soon after, the girl chose to follow the three dukes and head directly to the disaster zone. When cries for help echoed from the water, they rushed toward the sound without hesitation. But upon closer inspection, there were no refugees to be found. Instead, the air was thick with the scent of human blood. To uncover the truth, Ansel immediately ordered the soldiers to retrieve the bodies from the water. Upon examination, he discovered clear bite marks on the victims' necks. It was obvious they hadn't drowned, they had been killed by having their throats bitten through. Yet moments earlier, they had clearly been calling for help. At that moment, a bubbling sound suddenly rose from the water. Seeing this, Ansel immediately leapt in. Not long after, he dragged the killer out from below. Under Ansel's brutal interrogation, the culprit was forced to confess the truth. The three humans had originally been slaves owned by a certain half-blood family. Keeping human slaves had long become common among minor houses, and those with power even treated drinking human blood as a pleasure. Only then did the girl fully grasp how serious the situation truly was. If this ever reached the human world, it could easily ignite another full-scale war between the two races. That day also happened to be Hu Luobei's scheduled inspection of District 3. Along the way, Lin kept talking non-stop, but the girl remained uneasy, troubled by Alai's warning before her departure, sensing that something bad might happen here. Upon arriving at their destination, the girl was greeted by the warmth and praise of the people of District 3. What should have been a harmonious scene instead stirred a possessive desire within Lin. His expression darkened as he thought to himself that he would claim the girl no matter the cost, and anyone who stood in his way would be eliminated. Especially Ansel. After a long day of work, it was only at night that Hu Luobei changed her clothes, attended by her maid, Taro. At that moment, Lin's voice sounded from outside the door. Alai's warning before her departure instantly surfaced in Hu Luobei's mind. Alarm bells went off at once, and Hu Luobei refused Lin, claiming she had already gone to rest. The man standing outside with a bottle and glasses had no choice but to abandon his plan and leave in disappointment. Still uneasy, Hu Luobei asked Taro to sleep in the room with her that night. Though the maid felt it was improper, she eventually agreed after seeing Hu Luobei's pleading expression, and the night passed without incident. Instead, it made Hu Luobei wonder if she had been overthinking things or had misunderstood Alai's warning. The next morning, just as Hu Luobei finished washing up, Lin sent breakfast over. To her surprise, the cook turned out to be Teresa, the same woman who had caused her to collapse before. According to Teresa, Lin had deliberately sent her to the human empire to study human cuisine, all to prepare food that suited Hu Luobei's taste. Hearing this, Hu Luobei eagerly picked up her knife and fork to try it. After all, ever since arriving in the vampire realm, she had never truly tasted food from the human empire. She took a large bite only to find the flavor strangely unsettling. Seeing her reaction, Lin handed her a glass of milk, suggesting she ease it down. Hu Luobei thanked him politely. But just as the milk reached her lips, a sharp, irritating scent suddenly filled her nose. She asked Lin whether some kind of spice had been added to the milk. Lin panicked, clearly at a loss, and hurriedly lied that a servant might have made a mistake. He then ordered the servant to take it away and pour it out at once. The plan had failed yet again, leaving Lin furious. Damn it, without red wine, it was impossible to mask that distinctive scent, though fortunately the evidence had been destroyed in time. He immediately changed his expression and eagerly offered other pastries, only to have Hu Luobei decline with a smile. Soon after, Hu Luobei excused herself and left the dining hall. Back in her room, Hu Luobei quietly instructed Taro to prepare a few things. Fortunately, she had been alert enough to notice something wrong with the milk, though she still didn't know who was behind it. That peculiar scent, however, had left a deep impression. Anyone carrying it would certainly be involved. Her first stop was the easiest place to investigate, the kitchen. The head chef, no longer as sharp-tongued as before, treated Hu Luobei with unusual friendliness. She welcomed her warmly, and even offered her a mushroom sauce with an exceptionally rich flavor to taste. Without the slightest suspicion, Hu Luobei drank it. She had let her guard down around Teresa because neither the kitchen nor Teresa herself carried that distinctive scent, which meant the person who had tampered with the milk could not have been Teresa. At that moment, Lin's greeting sounded from behind her. He invited Hu Luobei to attend an art exhibition scheduled for a week later. However, Hu Luobei was set to leave for District 2 under Catherine's command the day after tomorrow, and the timing likely wouldn't work. Lin insisted that he would speak with Catherine himself and asked Hu Luobei to stay a little longer. Hu Luobei agreed with a gentle smile. Once Lin walked away, her smile collapsed instantly. The hand that had just brushed against him still carried that distinctive scent from the milk. As for who had drugged it, she already had her answer. She quietly asked Taro whether everything had been prepared, and Taro confirmed that it had. At that moment, Hu Luobei desperately wished she was wrong. Night soon fell and Teresa prepared a lavish dinner. Lin then brought out Hu Luobei's favorite red wine to celebrate. Hu Luobei drank it without hesitation. After finishing a single glass, she suddenly felt dizzy. Seeing this, Lin quickly supported her and offered to escort her back to rest. Yet at the doorway he showed no intention of leaving, insisting on going inside to take care of her. If Hu Luobei let her guard down for even a moment, Lin would have succeeded. When he realized she wouldn't let him in, Lin could only leave in frustration. However, Lin didn't leave completely. Instead, he stayed hidden at the far end of the corridor. As soon as Hu Luobei entered the room, she instructed Taro to move faster. Shortly after, Taro came out and explained to Lin that the princess was unwell and didn't require service tonight, so she would return to the servants' quarters to rest. Lin nodded, watching Taro walk away. He then took out the spare key he had prepared long ago. By that time, Hu Luobei had already taken the medicine and fallen asleep. Seeing his goal achieved, Lin quietly unlocked the door with the spare key and slipped inside. Gazing at the woman sleeping on the bed, he smiled and murmured, "Hu Luobei, I can finally have you." He pulled the woman into his arms, vowing he would never give her to anyone else. But to Lin's shock, Hu Luobei's voice suddenly sounded from the doorway. And when the woman on the bed removed her wig, it was revealed to be the maid, Taro. Only then did Lin realize he had fallen into a trap. He hurriedly tried to make excuses to distance himself, but none of them were enough to convince Hu Luobei, who had already been drugged earlier. Hu Luobei stared at Lin's panicked expression, utterly unable to believe it. What reason could possibly drive him to drug a woman? Hearing Lin's self-righteous excuses, Hu Luobei could no longer suppress the anger inside her. She shouted at him to stop talking and shut his mouth. To her disbelief, Lin suddenly knelt down, begging for her forgiveness and claiming that his love for her was no less than answers. Those words only deepened Hu Luobei's disappointment. She couldn't understand what right he thought he had to say such things. Without saying anything more, she turned away, leaving behind only a lonely silhouette as she walked out of the room. Although Lin's actions had clearly crossed the line, he was still one of the four dukes. For the sake of the empire's peace and stability, Hu Luobei decided not to pursue the matter further, asking only that he keep his distance from her in the future. She also instructed the maid not to tell anyone about what had happened, especially Answer, because if he ever found out, he would never let Lin off the hook. Overwhelmed and exhausted, Hu Luobei just wanted to be alone for a while. After sending Taro away, she finally broke down and cried in secret. At some point, Alai had quietly come to stand behind her. Seeing Hu Luobei's shoulders trembling as she sobbed filled Alai with pain. He gently comforted her, telling her that this situation was never her fault, it was Lin's. Hu Luobei slowly stopped crying and turned around. When she saw it was Alai, she finally let her grievances spill out, asking how Lin could do something like that, when she had always treated him as a friend. Alai admitted that once he sensed Lin's intentions, he had planned to protect Hu Luobei from the shadows. What he hadn't expected was that Hu Luobei had already protected herself so well. He gently stroked the girl's head, his voice just as soft, telling her not to cry. Lin should have reflected on his actions by now. They would proceed as planned and head to District 2 the day after tomorrow. That day happened to be when she would face her former rival, so the girl was carefully dressed up. Wearing a sharp, tailored uniform, she lost nothing to Catherine in either looks or presence. She was determined to win in sheer momentum alone. Speak of the devil, and she appeared. Catherine wasn't wearing her usual uniform, but instead a striking red gown that made her look elegant and refined. The moment their eyes met, the air grew awkward, as if the two of them together carried hundreds of unspoken stares. Even Lin couldn't help but think to himself that the scene was nothing short of spectacular. Catherine was the first to regain her composure and urged the girl to hurry along. Just as the girl turned away, Lin suddenly reached out and grabbed her arm. He apologized once again for drugging the milk days earlier, hoping she could let bygones be bygones and visit District 3 again. For the sake of the Empire's stability, the girl chose to keep the truth hidden and maintained only a superficial friendship with Lin. After getting into the carriage bound for District 2, she finally relaxed. She slumped back against the seat, only to be immediately scolded by Catherine for her posture. "Sit up straight. You look completely sloppy. I honestly don't know what answer and the others see in you." Startled like a reprimanded child, the girl straightened her back at once. After that, silence fell between the two once more. The girl was the first to break the silence, finally voicing the question she had buried for years: why Catherine had always targeted her. At those words, Catherine sprang to her feet. She accused the girl of shamelessness, claiming she had stolen her fiancé and torn apart the bond among the four dukes who had grown up together. The girl showed no anger. Instead, she calmly asked whether Catherine's fiancé wasn't the very answer she herself had once rejected for lacking status and power. As for the rift between the other dukes, wasn't it caused by Catherine's own unforgivable actions being exposed? The words struck straight at Catherine's deepest wound. Humiliated and enraged, she raised her hand and lashed out toward the girl. But Hu Luobei was no longer someone to be bullied. She caught Catherine's descending hand without hesitation. With a stern expression, she declared that she was now the Empire's high priestess, an equal standing before the Empire, and demanded to know what right Catherine had to strike her. These two women had once been rivals, and whenever they shared the same space, conflict was inevitable. In the past, Catherine as a duke had always held the upper hand. But now the balance had clearly shifted. The girl carried greater authority, having never committed a single unforgivable act. She proceeded to list Catherine's crimes one by one without mercy. Catherine, knowing she was in the wrong, found herself unable to argue back. At that moment, only one thought remained in her mind: kill Hu Luobei. It was the simplest solution. Hu Luobei couldn't help but feel exasperated by Catherine's way of thinking. She stated bluntly that killing her would achieve nothing because Ansel still had feelings for her. If she were to die, she would only become Ansel's eternal white moonlight. Besides, she no longer cared for Ansel at all. If you want someone's love, you earn it yourself. Tripping others will never get you there. Catherine seemed to pause as if she had actually understood the point. But her pride would never allow her to bow her head. She turned away angrily, saying she didn't need anyone telling her how to act. Then she added coldly, "If you truly have no interest in Ansel, you'd better not let me catch you playing tricks." Their argument carried on for the rest of the long journey. Before they realized it, they had already arrived in District 2. Unlike the other districts, Catherine did not lead the High Priestess through public inspections. Instead, she brought her straight to the Duke's estate. She dismissed it casually, telling her to eat, enjoy the gardens, and leave when the time came. Her presence meant nothing here. To Hu Luobei, it was a blatant humiliation, and she made it clear this was a royal assignment she would see through. When Catherine heard the word, the king, she had no choice but to back down and loosen the restrictions, allowing Hu Luobei to go out and look around freely. With that, she turned and left. Only then did Hu Luobei realize Catherine hadn't even told her where she was supposed to stay. She decided not to dwell on it and eagerly stepped into the district to see the people for herself. As expected of District 2, the financial hub, the streets were lined with small businesses and vendors. Suddenly, a young boy crashed straight into her arms. Hu Luobei crouched down, about to comfort him, but the boy bolted away in an instant, snatching the king's dagger that hung from her chest. She immediately chased after him. The boy was incredibly agile and quickly pulled dozens of meters ahead of her. At that moment, an armored man standing on a nearby wall stepped in, drawing his blade to help. He flicked a stone from his hand, striking the boy's leg with perfect accuracy. The boy fell to the ground, and Hu Luobei rushed over, worried and concerned, to check if he was hurt. Instead of gratitude, the boy shouted at her to mind her own business. He grabbed a handful of dust from the ground and flung it straight into her face. As Hu Luobei rubbed her stinging eyes, the thief seized the moment to escape and vanished without a trace. At that moment, the armored man descended from above. He assured Hu Luobei that he would help her recover the item. Hu Luobei stopped him, asking him to take her along. Whatever was inside couldn't be seen by just anyone. The armored man hesitated for a moment, then suddenly scooped her up around the waist. With a light leap, the two of them soared into the air. By then, the boy had already slipped into a secluded forest. Seeing no one chasing after him, he finally relaxed and opened the bundle. When he saw the dazzling gemstone set into the dagger, he couldn't help whispering, "So beautiful. This must be worth a lot." "Mom can be saved now," the boy muttered, hesitating. He walked up to a door and knocked softly. The person inside recognized him and asked impatiently, "What useless junk did you steal this time?" As the boy handed over the item, guilt flickered across his face. Just then Hu Luobei arrived and shouted at him, "That belongs to me." Startled, the boy lost his footing and tumbled down the stairs. Seeing him trembling in fear, Hu Luobei softened her tone and gently told him that if he handed the item back he could leave, she wouldn't hurt him. After hearing this, the boy dropped the bundle and fled in a hurry. Hu Luobei picked it up and opened it to check. But the dagger inside had already been swapped for a wooden stick. The person inside the room told Hu Luobei that the boy lived in the commoner's district. The exact address was unclear, only that he belonged to the Hill Abigail family. She turned to ask the armored man behind her if he knew where the commoner's district was. The armored man shook his head, only then realizing that he didn't even know the name of this kind stranger. Though they were complete strangers, there was an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Hu Luobei politely extended her hand and asked for his name. Yet the armored man fell silent as if he had suddenly lost his voice. After repeated requests from Hu Luobei, he finally agreed only to accompany her in searching for the boy. The armored man pointed toward the sky and said, "We search from above." Before she could respond, he lifted Hu Luobei into his arms and leapt upward. Held securely against his chest, Hu Luobei found herself thinking of another man. The last person who had carried her like this was a lie. She wondered where a lie was now and what he might be doing. A fleeting thought crossed her mind. Being this kind of female lead felt almost effortless, protected wherever she went. This mysterious armored man stayed by her side as they searched for the royal dagger. Though his face was hidden, the scent he carried felt strangely familiar, yet she couldn't recall where she had encountered it before. Following clues given by others, the two arrived at the commoner's district. The people there looked exhausted and lifeless, a stark contrast to the prosperity of the other streets. Hu Luobei asked a sleeping boy where the laundry slave Abigail's family lived, only to be rudely chased away. But the moment she produced a silver coin, the boy sat straight up, his attitude turning instantly respectful, even offering politely to guide her. The armored man behind her noticed something but chose not to comment. The two followed the boy into a narrow, secluded alley. As the boy shouted, "We've got visitors," several thugs suddenly emerged from all sides, staring at them with sinister expressions. They threatened the pair, demanding they be generous and pay for a decent meal. Just as Hu Luobei found herself at a loss, the armored man stepped forward, shielding her behind him. Using only a fraction of his strength, he effortlessly took down all the thugs. He then restrained one of them and ordered him to lead the way. Soon they arrived at the Abigail household, where the boy's mother was hanging laundry in the yard. Hu Luobei carefully explained that she had come to look for the woman's son regarding a lost item. The woman immediately understood what she meant. At her call, Hu Luobei learned that the boy's name was Wanda. Wanda responded and came out, only to freeze in fear the moment he saw Hu Luobei and the armored man. Hu Luobei still arrived a step too late. Wanda shoved her aside, telling her that the dagger had already been sold. Hearing this, Hu Luobei became visibly agitated and grabbed Wanda by the shoulders, urging him to find a way to get it back immediately. But Wanda snapped, accusing the purebloods of constant oppression and insisting that stealing from them was only fair. Seeing how deeply wronged he felt, Hu Luobei, as the Empire's high priestess, tried to calmly understand his situation. Wanda explained that he was a half-blood. His mother washed clothes for pureblood families, yet they constantly withheld her wages. Even reporting it to the authorities was useless. Law enforcement never stood up for half-bloods, so he treated the money from selling the dagger as her unpaid salary. The boy's tragic story struck a chord with Huluobei. She made up her mind to ensure those debtors would return every coin owed to his mother. Deeply moved by her promise, Wanda finally relented. He led them to a dark, damp underground tavern. The stench of alcohol mixed with mold made Huluobei feel nauseous. Noticing her discomfort, the armored man quietly handed her a handkerchief. She accepted it and covered her nose, a warm feeling blooming in her chest at his thoughtfulness. Beneath his cold exterior, the armored man's quiet consideration earned Huluobei's genuine favor. The boy led them into the underground tavern and told the vicious-looking man at the bar that he wanted to see the Baron. The man took one look at him, decided he had no money and told him to get lost. Huluobei was about to take out the gold coins she carried with her, when the armored man beside her raised a hand and stopped her. Without a word, he stepped up to the bar and placed a ring on the counter. Its color and material alone marked it unmistakably as a noble item. The man immediately recognized its value and told them the person they were looking for was at the end of the corridor. Inside the private room, Huluobei got straight to the point, offering to redeem the dagger for twice the original price. The yellow-haired man flatly denied ever receiving such an item. Faced with Wanda's furious accusations, he not only refused to admit anything, but even resorted to threatening an unarmed child with violence. Unable to bear seeing Wanda hurt, Huluobei swallowed her anger and apologized. She then led everyone away from the brewing trouble. Deep down, she knew the man had likely recognized what the dagger represented and deliberately refused to acknowledge it. But that raised another question. After paying such a high price, who was he planning to sell it to? A thought surfaced in Huluobei's mind. Could Catherine's business dealings be behind this? Yet she quickly dismissed the idea, choosing to believe that Catherine had already begun to reflect on her actions. The armored man had already come up with a plan. At that moment, he was prying open the ventilation shaft of the underground tavern, preparing to sneak inside from there. Huluobei couldn't help but feel genuine admiration for him. Before he left, she told him that even if he failed, it didn't matter, as long as he came back safely. What kind of expression he hid beneath that armor, no one could tell. The two people waiting outside were each lost in their own thoughts. Huluobei debated whether she should seek Catherine's help, but feared Catherine might use it as an excuse to report her to His Majesty. Meanwhile, Wanda's guilt finally burst out and he broke down in tears. Huluobei comforted him for quite some time, and once he had calmed down, she told him to go home and rest. At the same time, a visitor arrived at Catherine's ducal residence. The moment Catherine saw the king's dagger, she immediately ordered the person to be brought in. The visitor was a red-haired man, an upperclassman of Huluobei's from the Vampire Academy, and also her rival during the competition for the position of High Priestess. Even the scheming Catherine seemed capable of restraint, while this red-haired man, defeated by Huluobei, had harbored resentment ever since losing the High Priestess title to her. He presented the Lost King's dagger to Catherine and whispered that now was the perfect chance to kill Huluobei. Without the king's dagger, the human princess was nothing more than an ordinary girl, someone who could die by the roadside without raising suspicion. He told Catherine that everything had already been arranged. In the past, Catherine would have praised him for a job well done. But now, after everything she had experienced because of Huluobei, Catherine no longer wanted to commit such unforgivable acts. She glared viciously at the red-haired man who was seeking credit and coldly demanded to know where the person was. Meanwhile, Huluobei was anxiously waiting for the armored man. A long time had passed, yet there was still no sign of him, making her worry that something had gone wrong. What she failed to notice was a shadow slowly creeping toward her. The sudden appearance of the figure startled Huluobei, causing her to fall to the ground. The icy blade reflected the terror in her eyes. The dagger sliced across her arm. The assassin, unsatisfied, pressed her head down forcefully. Huluobei clenched her teeth in anger. Was this Catherine's doing again? Suddenly, a sharp whooshing sound cut through the air. The assassin in front of her was instantly splattered with blood. Huluobei thought it was Eli who had saved her and cried out his name in relief. But what she heard instead was Catherine's puzzled voice. Eli, who is that? Huluobei was still shaken from the scare, when Catherine grabbed her and pulled her away without explanation. But the armored man hadn't come out yet, and Huluobei pleaded with her to go into the underground distillery to look for a friend. Catherine complained that she was troublesome, yet still tore a strip of cloth to bandage her wound. She then told Hu Luobei to stay close, and the two entered the distillery together. When they asked about the armored man, the subordinates exchanged glances, no one daring to speak. Catherine shouted coldly, "The high priestess is asking, speak now." A trembling ringleader stepped forward, clutching his bruised face as he explained that the armored man had been discovered in the treasure vault, knocked down the witnesses and escaped through the skylight. Hearing this, Hu Luobei finally relaxed. Just like him. Catherine told her not to worry. Hu Luobei tried to say more, but Catherine cut her off. "You're injured and still worrying about others. If you're not leaving, I am." Unexpectedly, Catherine proved sharp-tongued but soft-hearted, having not only rescued Hu Luobei, but also treated her wound. As they exited the distillery, Hu Luobei thanked her. Catherine returned to her usual pride. "A thank you from the high priestess. I can't afford that." Hu Luobei was still upset, but Catherine had become easier to talk to, and after helping her so much, a simple thank you felt like settling the score. She just didn't know where the armored man had gone. Turning back toward the dark alley, she thought quietly, "Please come find me." What she didn't know was that the armored man was watching her from the shadows. Seeing Hu Luobei's slender figure, he felt a wave of relief. "Thank goodness you're safe." Back at the Duke's estate, Hu Luobei was enjoying a warm bath, when she suddenly thought of the armored man who had taken such careful care of her, and wondered whose face lay beneath the mask. That ring was clearly noble in origin. Could it have been Answer? She asked the maid where Answer had been these past few days. Taro told her the Duke was conducting military drills in District 1, as each Duke had to prepare within their own territory. Hu Luobei lowered her gaze in disappointment. She really had been overthinking it. Answer was always cold and aloof. Soon after, Catherine's maid escorted Hu Luobei to the reception hall, returning the king's dagger to her. Hu Luobei was puzzled. Why was it here? Catherine spoke sternly yet with an oddly gentle tone. Instead of asking pointless questions, keep the dagger safe. Lose it again and you won't be this lucky. This is His Majesty's gift, don't disgrace it. Hu Luobei could tell they truly revered the king and asked Catherine why that was. That question opened the floodgates of Catherine's words. The once quiet grand hall grew lively with the arrival of another young woman. At the same time, tension stirred across the rooftop above them. The armored man noticed the stranger who had intruded into the estate, his sword aimed at Alai, demanding to know who he was. Alai didn't answer. His gaze remained fixed on the window on Hu Luobei, who was chatting comfortably with Catherine inside. Once he confirmed Hu Luobei was safe, he turned to leave. But in the next moment, an iron chain shot out, binding his wrist in place. The armored man tightened the chain and repeated the question, "Who are you?" Two mysterious men faced each other on the rooftop, the air heavy with tension. Alai spoke calmly, "You shouldn't be here, your feelings for her have clouded your judgment." The figure beneath the armor froze for a brief moment. The chain loosened as the armored man demanded to know his true identity. Alai finally explained that he was merely a knight tasked with guarding the high priestess, and that once Hu Luobei had secured her place he would leave. After Alai departed, the armored man remained still, lost in thought about his own actions. Suddenly, an excited cry shattered the quiet night. Hu Luobei was standing on the balcony. She had spotted the armored man and urgently told him not to leave, saying she would come to him at once. Catherine, meanwhile, was utterly stunned. Someone had infiltrated the Duke's estate without anyone noticing. Hu Luobei carefully climbed up onto the rooftop and returned the freshly washed handkerchief to the armored man. She also gave him a token that belonged only to the two of them, a small wooden carving shaped like a cat. It was something Hu Luobei had carved herself earlier that afternoon. She told the armored man that if he ever needed help, he could come to her with that token. Upon hearing this, the armored man immediately knelt on one knee, saying, "It would be my honor," before taking his leave. Watching his retreating figure, Hu Luobei quietly hoped they would meet again someday. Suddenly, Catherine's impatient voice echoed from below. "If you don't come down now, I'm taking the ladder away." Moments later, the armored man appeared inside Ungshir's study. Ungshir lounged on the sofa, not even lifting his head. "You're back," he said lazily. The armored man removed his mask, revealing his true face. "You've worked hard these past few days." The figure on the sofa then dropped his disguise, revealing Hughes beneath it. Hughes let out a cold chuckle. Taking off the disguise isn't enough. My fee is quite steep. It turned out Ungshir had feared Catherine would target Huluobei, so he had forced Hughes to impersonate him and hold the estate. Meanwhile, the real Ungshir went to District 2 to watch over Huluobei from the shadows. But under the current circumstances, Hughes poured cold water on him. What you did this time crossed the line. Besides, Huluobei is now the high priestess. She's forbidden from marrying anyone. Trying to win her back is meaningless. Ungshir already knew this, so he didn't get angry. Instead, he asked Hughes in return, "Is that the conclusion you reached after repeatedly proposing to Huluobei and testing her resolve?" Hughes gave a sly smile and admitted that he genuinely wanted to marry Huluobei. After all, having her meant taking another step forward in the field of mathematics. Her existence only needed to help him solve every mathematical obstacle. Those words completely ignited Ungshir's anger. He grabbed Hughes by the collar. Two men had fallen for the same woman, yet Hughes's affection was nothing more than seeing her as a tool to advance further in mathematics. Ungshir clenched his grip and growled, "Huluobei is her own person. She will never be anyone's tool." Even he hadn't expected those words to come out of his own mouth. Hughes's smile turned sharp as he asked whether Ungshir wanted to go through, one by one, how he had treated Huluobei in the past. The moment those words landed, Ungshir's hand loosened. He leaned weakly against the table, his thoughts in chaos, his speech disordered. Hughes's slender fingers brushed through Ungshir's hair as he said softly, "I know you truly love her now, but it's already too late." The next day marked the end of Huluobei's inspection of District 2. Ungshir arrived early to escort her to District 1. On the way, he ran into Catherine. During their conversation, Catherine suddenly asked, "If Huluobei hadn't become the high priestess, would you still be trying to win her back?" Ungshir's answer was straightforward. He liked her, and it had nothing to do with status. In fact, he wished Huluobei had never become the high priestess. Catherine pressed on, asking, "Then what exactly is it about her that's worth liking?" In her eyes, Huluobei was full of flaws with little to admire. Ungshir's response was calm and unwavering. Liking someone means not caring about their flaws at all. Seeing how the once cold and detached Ungshir had become so devoted, Catherine couldn't help but warn him not to change himself just to chase after someone. Ungshir replied firmly, "I've never changed." After a brief silence, he added, "Whether it's strength or political marriages, you and your family still have plenty of options. You and I were never meant to be." Catherine replied that it had nothing to do with personal gain. She simply didn't want to give up. Ungshir let out a soft laugh. "Is that so? Neither do I." Before long, Huluobei walked over, dressed in her uniform. Catherine complained about her not wearing a gown, but Huluobei explained that she wanted to go to the commoner district to look for that child. Upon hearing this, Ungshir insisted on going along, even setting aside his military duties. The three of them bickered their way to the commoner district. What awaited them there made their hearts sink. Overnight, the entire district had changed completely. Every single resident was gone. After returning, they reported the incident to Catherine, since it had occurred within District 2 under her authority. To their surprise, Catherine dismissed it outright, saying the district had few residents and that they were all half-bloods anyway, hardly a serious issue. Her implication was clear. Half-blood lives were not worth caring about. Huluobei immediately questioned what she meant by that. Growing impatient, Catherine shot back, "What does it have to do with you? I'll handle matters in my district myself." Standing nearby, Ungshir also urged Huluobei to leave. She forcefully shook his hand away. Huluobei accused Catherine of never taking half-blood affairs seriously. Catherine dropped all pretense, stating bluntly that she truly didn't care. Even if an entire street vanished or every half-blood died, she wouldn't lose sleep over it. Huluobei was stunned that a duke of a foreign state could say something so cruel. She then looked at Ungshir, who had remained silent. His indifferent expression made it seem like he was listening to something utterly trivial. Instead of defending her, he told her not to push the issue further. Her anger flared. "How can you trust that Catherine will actually resolve this?" Offended by the accusation, Catherine stepped forward, grabbing Huluobei by the collar and warning her not to go too far. At that moment, Ungshir seized Catherine's wrist. "Let go." His voice was cold enough to send a chill down the spine. "Do I need to repeat myself?" Though seething inside, Catherine still held deep respect for Ungshir. In the end, she released her grip. After that, Ungshir told Hu Luobei to trust that Catherine would handle the matter properly. Hu Luobei didn't respond. With her head lowered, she walked out of the hall in silence. Catherine continued muttering complaints, saying, "It's not like I said I wouldn't deal with it." Ungshir followed quietly behind Hu Luobei. After walking for a long while, Hu Luobei suppressed her anger and asked softly, "Do you look down on half-bloods too, don't you?" Ungshir answered with silence. To Hu Luobei, half-bloods were still citizens of the Blood Empire. Why should they be treated with such discrimination? Ungshir instead asked her if she still remembered why she had married into this land in the first place. Hu Luobei couldn't give a clear answer. Back then she had simply wished to marry a handsome man, and that wish brought her here. Ungshir followed up with a piercing question. "As a diplomatic bride, you knew nothing at all?" Hu Luobei murmured, "A diplomatic bride? Even the only knight meant to protect me is using me. Who would truly care about me? In this world I've always been alone." Her anger lingered, rooted in Ungshir's apparent indifference toward half-blood lives, something her kindness could not accept. Seeing her distress, Ungshir began to explain the Empire's view of half-bloods. In the beginning, the Blood Clan consisted only of purebloods and sacred bloods. Half-bloods later emerged as the result of unions between humans and blood kin, possessing far shorter lifespans and weaker overall abilities. Even so, the king continued to treat them equally, allowing those of strong character and talent to rise to high office and serve as royal guards. What no one expected was that the half-bloods had secretly colluded with foreign powers, joining forces with the Byzantine Human Empire's army. From within and without, they launched coordinated attacks on the Blood Clan's borders, causing devastating losses. Only then did Hu Luobei truly understand why Catherine said Ungshir would never forgive treason. As the war situation turned increasingly dire, the queen opened the gate of sacred authority. Empowered by its blessing, the Sacred Blood Clan gained unparalleled strength and magic, turning the tide in a single decisive strike. From that moment on, the entire Blood Clan came to revere the king and queen above all else. After the war, the two nations signed a peace treaty, which included a clause requiring the Blood Empire to take a Byzantine princess every 50 years. Even now, Ungshir found that agreement deeply unsettling. What made matters worse was that after the war ended, the half-bloods once again committed collective treason. Yet the king still chose forgiveness, issuing only lenient punishments and continuing to recognize them as citizens. At this point, Ungshir's emotions flared. To defect during wartime is an unforgivable crime. Even if His Majesty had ordered the execution of all half-bloods back then, it would not have been unjust. Realizing he had lost control, he immediately apologized to Hu Luobei. This was the first time she had heard these truths, and she finally understood the Blood Clan's hatred toward war. But she had also seen half-bloods bullied, even killed. She had seen Wanda's tears and his sincere remorse. She couldn't bring herself not to sympathize with them. Ungshir understood this well, and he spoke to the conflicted Hu Luobei gently. "You don't need to carry this burden. Your kindness and conviction are yours alone. Never feel ashamed of being gentle." Hu Luobei was deeply moved by his words. Ungshir lowered himself to one knee, his voice gentle as if soothing a child he cherished. "The priestess's inspection schedule can't be delayed. Leave this matter to Catherine. I promise you, while I'm here, I will make sure she treats this seriously. There will be no brushing it aside, that I will see it through and give you a resolution you can accept. Trust me, all right?"